BYU basketball coach Kevin Young made it very clear he plans on using all 13 of his roster slots in his first year at the helm of the BYU basketball program. Could the latest addition be a top 10 prospect in Kanon Catchings? We're talking about that on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs, so you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And you probably saw the news over the weekend that Kanon Catchings plans to make a visit to BYU. According to Robbie McCombs, that visit is scheduled to begin tomorrow as he makes the trek to Provo, Utah. Recently decommitted from Purdue, or actually was released from his national letter of intent. So a similar situation to Elijah Crawford. Remember, he was released from his NLI from Stanford before landing at BYU. And there was a big reason why Elijah Crawford landed at BYU is because he was recruited principally by Brandon Dunson at Stanford. When Dunson landed at BYU, that gave BYU a leg up in that competition. Why am I bringing that up? Because the very same scenario could be playing out here for Kanon Catchings in the fact that Tim Fanning, who has recently joined the BYU staff as an assistant coach, was his head coach in Overtime Elite, the most recent league and high school program that he played for. Catchings is an incredible prospect. 4 stars, according to most recruiting services out there. 6'9", has positional versatility with the ability to potentially play the 2, 3, or the 4 spot. I mentioned, let's say it's 6'9", 180, 190 pounds, so a little on the skinny side. But the thing about it is, last week when we were out there talking with Kevin Young about how he planned to go about filling out his final 2 roster slots, he made the point that he wants positional size as a thing that he would like to add for BYU. Now, I still believe BYU still needs to find a true big man just to offer size on the interior. But Kanon Catchings, if you can bring a guy like this in of his caliber, you absolutely do it. It isn't a phenomenal pickup once again for Kevin Young and company if Kanon Catchings decides that BYU is where he wants to be. I mentioned he's got positional versatility at 6'9". Him and Yegor Denim could create an incredible wing combo for BYU. Both of them standing 6'8", 6'9" on the wings, both of them potential lottery picks in next year's NBA draft. Think about the versatility this BYU lineup would have, having all of these guys that would be available to them at any given time. Now, the question, and I had a couple of you reach out on our Locked On Cougars Insider group over the weekend and ask about, well, if they brought in Catchings, Jake, how in the world is Kevin Young going to have any less than maybe a 10-man rotation? Frankly, I don't know, and that will have to take itself and figure itself out over time. But we also saw last year, Mark Pope, he was unabashed in saying, we'll play a 10-man rotation and whittle it down when we need to. And they did that throughout the majority of their non-conference slate. Kevin Young should be afforded the same opportunity here. No matter how many talented guys, let's say Kanon Catchings becomes the 12th of 13 guys on the roster. Why can't he come in and beat out some of the more established or guys you have penciled in as a starter or a key backup in a role, because he is simply put the better player on the court? There is nothing wrong with that. That is the thing about this, is the concerns about the rotation. Why be concerned about a rotation in the month of June? Be concerned about the rotation when we come to the month of January and see where things stand at that point. The nice part about this is Kevin Young is in asset accumulation mode, and that's a term we use all the time when it comes to professional sports, more often than we do with college sports, because assets usually refer to draft picks and the bringing in talent. But that's, in this day and age, folks, college basketball, that's exactly what it is. You're in asset accumulation mode. And if Kanon Catchings decides that BYU is where he wants to be, you absolutely bring this guy in and allow him to prove himself on the court. Having 2 potential first-round draft picks on the court at any given time for BYU next year would absolutely be incredible to watch. I recently renewed our tickets that we have for the podcast for our Locked On Cougars group to go out to basketball hot ticket this fall if everything continues to kind of go the way that they're going for BYU basketball. Kevin Young is absolutely killing it out there. It's incredible to hear him talk about what he's got a vision in his mind for BYU basketball to be, and he's executing it so far as I can tell about as well as you could have hoped for. Now, obviously, there's a lot still to come because Catchings could opt to go elsewhere. He's got a number of other visits. He's planning on visiting both BYU and Florida State. There was some rumor they may end up going to Tennessee as well. But the thing is, you bring him in, you sell him on what they've got for him in terms of the vision you have for him, and then have Tim Fanning, who coached him in Overtime Elite, sell him like Brandon Dunson did for Elijah Crawford on what BYU can do for this young man. I think this would be another home run addition for the BYU basketball program. No matter how much talent may already be on this roster, you let that play out. If guys simply put aren't going to hack it and aren't able to keep up with the other guys that maybe that were quote unquote behind them going into a season, that's great. The whole adage I like to use on this podcast is what Jeff Grimes and multiple other coaches over the years have mentioned. Iron sharpens iron. You get elite talents like a Kanon Catchings into your basketball program, that's only going to benefit you as a BYU Cougar fan to watch a guy's caliber and his talent come and play for BYU, even if it is a one-and-done situation. Kevin Young wants to create an NBA factory, and that's going to require BYU to be willing to put up with one-and-done prospects, guys who want to come in and compete and show what they can do for the BYU basketball program in a 5 and 6 month span, and then off they go to the NBA. You know what? There's going to be a whole lot of that going on if Kevin Young is successful in doing what he envisions for the BYU basketball program. And I, for one, can't wait to watch it play out because that is going to allow me selfishly to sit on media row and watch some really elite talent play out. And by the way, it's already very high-level basketball in the Big 12 to begin with, but having guys on BYU side who are just as good as maybe some of the players are going up against, hey, sign me up. I'm all over that. I would love to watch that play out. So we'll see what happens. So tomorrow, expected to have Catchings on campus, and I would hope to hear some news on his recruiting status going forward not too long after that. All right, coming up next, it is June. It is the downtime. So we're going to start doing what we like to call our position previews. We'll carry these on throughout the summer, getting you ready for BYU football upcoming. Today, we're going to talk about running backs. I think it's a position group that is going to be critical to any and all success that BYU has on the gridiron this fall. We'll talk about that as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. Whether you're hiring for a small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role you're hiring for. That's why you guys need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster, and they do it also for free. Think about that. LinkedIn is not just a job board, my friends. It is helping you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. And even those who aren't actively looking for a job might be open to the perfect opportunity or the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Simply put, on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours of their job posting. Hire professionals and do it like a professional on LinkedIn. They know that small businesses are wearing many, many hats, might not have the adequate time or resources to hire. So I want to make it as simple as possible by giving you all the tools you guys need. Over 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. So why aren't you? So visit LinkedIn today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post that job for free. Once again, linkedin.com/lockedoncollege, and check it out today. That's all courtesy of your friends over at LinkedIn. Proud sponsors right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you once again for my Locked On Cougars, your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us here. Let's talk BYU positional previews. Today, typically we've done quarterbacks. We do a lot of this, but today, let's talk running backs. Now, here's the deal about BYU in the running back position. Last year, the running game was abysmal until really the final two games of the year against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, when BYU absolutely had their back against the wall and they were trying to find any way they could to win a sixth game and get to the postseason. The running game finally showed some signs of life. Why it didn't exist before that? Well, there's a cavalcade of different things I believe that played into that. The offensive line play, the fact that you couldn't keep certain running backs healthy. And the other issue is I don't think there was just much in terms of the functionality amongst the coaches and getting guys on the same page player-wise. There just was dysfunction there, and it just never panned out. Everything we hear / I have seen with my own eyes through spring camp screams to me that dysfunction is gone now. Daryl Funk is out. He was let go as BYU's offensive line coach. He also decided to change out the tight ends position, but we'll talk about those in future episodes. But the offensive line is going to be critical to any and all success the BYU running backs have. But the good part is, and we had Jeff Hansen on the podcast, it'll be a week ago, so last Monday, he talked about the fact that LJ Martin essentially arrived a year ahead of schedule for BYU. Remember, he was a guy that was a true freshman, a 4-star talent coming out of El Paso, Texas. The thought was that, okay, this kid has got something good, but it may take some time for him to realize that potential. Then you had the issues that BYU had with the running game, and he comes on very, very strong. I will never forget what he did against Arkansas in particular in that win down there in Fayetteville. Just an incredible performance for a true freshman. He was unafraid of the moment and really burst onto the scene. Now, he had an injury that precluded him from playing the entire year last year, and ultimately he played a second fiddle in the final stanza of the season. But this year, it's the LJ Martin show. If he is good to go, BYU, speaking of like just every game, he is going to be BYU's number one running back. I've got no problem saying that. He looked the part in spring camp. He bulked up. He legitimately added 20 pounds. He looked the part in terms of transforming his body. And this should be the year that he really puts a stamp on making that position his own. And that's great news if you're a Cougar fan. You want to have a guy of his caliber come in, take the position, and make it his own. Now, he won't do it alone because obviously you need to have guys around him who can buoy him up. But the good news is that in a critical moment, let's say it's 3rd and 3, game's on the line, you need to get that first down, and you tell the offensive line led by Connor Pay, et cetera, and say, guys, get us a hole, and you turn to LJ and say, LJ, get the first down. You want to have the Tyler Algier effect that you can go and salt a game away with your running game. That's what BYU's whole MO throughout spring camp was getting back to having a physical, nasty run game. Only time will tell if that pays off. And obviously, they're going to have to go through training camp coming up in August. But I believe that LJ Martin is absolutely rock solid, your number one running back. But like I mentioned, he needs to have guys around him who can help him out along the way. Enter Miles Davis. Miles Davis has been around BYU seemingly forever. He only a redshirt junior, crazily enough, out of Las Vegas, a converted wide receiver. What I saw in spring ball from Miles Davis is him finally starting to look like a true running back. Remember, he's a converted wide receiver, and that can cause issues in terms of understanding how to set up blocks and understanding the patience it takes as a running back. Miles Davis has had flashes of absolute brilliance for BYU throughout his career so far, but it felt like in spring camp, in the limited doses I saw / what I heard from our practice insiders, is that Miles Davis finally is taking the leap. That is good news because I think he will be the number 2 option behind LJ Martin. That's good to have a guy who's a veteran in Miles Davis who wants to prove himself. 6 foot, 215 pounds, got the adequate size you want in a running back, especially as your number 2. And I think that he is capable of contributing. Now, enter the wild card in all of this. The guy that I believe, if everything that we saw in spring camp / heard is legitimate, he could emerge this season as this year's LJ Martin. And what I mean by that is a freshman who just comes on strong. The name, Pokaiaua Haunga. Haunga. I've got that one right. Hopefully I did that correctly. 5'11", 200-pound freshman off of a mission out of Timpview High School. He showed signs of a very, very nice complimentary back to LJ Martin during spring camp. Pokai, the comparison has been to, remember when Reno Mahe, then Junior Mahe, took BYU by storm as a freshman and really was a star player in the making and ultimately ended up being a star the entire rest of his career? That's what Pokaiaua Haunga looks like he's got in his bag of tricks. I'm telling you, he's the wild card in all of this. He is the name you'll want to know. If he breaks out, wears the number 23, if all of a sudden he's breaking out at some point during the season, you can say, oh, I heard about him back in June from Jay Catch on Locked On Cougars. I'm not the only one. Let me be very clear about that. I'm not the only one singing his praises, but keep an eye on that name because he has got every skill set, it feels like. And the good news is he is now a 20-year-old freshman, and it looks like the future is very, very bright for him. Now, also enter the name Hinckley Ropati into the mix. Ropati is coming off an ACL injury. He was practicing uninhibited during spring camp from what we understood. So that's good to hear because 5'9", 220 pounds, just rock solid, full of muscle. Remember that famous meme that Fesi Sitake made with him a couple years back of inserting his face and putting it on Hinckley Ropati's body. Hinckley is an incredibly physical player. If he can stay healthy, there's no reason to think that he can't reprise his role as BYU's screen game star. He was a very capable running back. Let me be very honest about that, but his background is more as a slot receiver. We had him on this podcast last year, and he talked about the fact he came up as a slot receiver in junior high and high school, and that's where his skill set is. Make him your screen specialist. Put him out in space and let him do his thing. He obviously can step in and play running back if needed, but he's probably going to serve better as more of a specialty role, it feels like to me. I know that being a senior and obviously this being his final hurrah at BYU, he wants to go out and have a monster season, but it feels like that he's going to play second, third, fourth fiddle behind some other running backs, but carve a role out for yourself. Other names to mention on the running back side of things include Enoch Nawahine, a transfer from Utah State. He's shown during practice the ability to pick up tough yards, but I just feel like there's a lot of bodies in front of him. And then also two other freshmen in Sione Aimoa. Now, don't confuse him with Sione Moa, who plays linebacker for BYU, but Sione Aimoa and the freshman at Timpview High School, preferred walk-on. And then Jovesa Demuni, last name should sound familiar. He is the nephew, legitimately the nephew of Jack Demuni, who works on BYU's off-field staff in the offices. But he is a guy that is very highly thought of coming out as well. We'll see if Jovesa can emerge this fall and really start to carve out a niche for himself. But the nice part about the running back position is you've got a clear number one. It's LJ Martin. It's the LJ Martin show this year for BYU if he stays healthy the entire year, and knock on wood he does, because when he is on the field, good things happen. He has got the vision. He is a thoroughbred, to use that example for a running back. He's just been trained as a running back coming up. Remember, I talked about Miles Davis being a converted wide receiver, Hinckley Ropati being a former slot receiver. They're guys who have moved into the running back position during their college years. That's not the case with LJ Martin. That's not the case with Pokaiaua Haunga. Now, I know Haunga also played some slot receiver and wide receiver in high school, but he's more of a traditional running back. When guys have been brought up and have understood the nuances of playing the running back position their entire life, it's just a little different feel to them. And when you have a guy the caliber of LJ Martin, yeah, you give him the ball and get out of his way. He has got the capability of being an absolute star for BYU. I'm not going to make the comparison lightly, but he is the next version of Jamal Williams. He is the next version of Tyler Algier, both of them now NFL caliber star running backs, but he has got that type of potential in him. And the nice part is BYU has got him on the books for at least another year, barring something unforeseen. Speaking of him potentially going 3 and out if it were to play out that way. But it feels like this could be the coming out party for LJ Martin. I hope it plays out that way. And the complement of players around him, I mentioned you have Miles Davis, you have Pokaiaua Haunga, you've got Hinckley Ropati. I think those make up the 4-man rotation or the 4-man depth chart for BYU at running back. Other guys will have to wait their time and show what they're capable of. But with those 4 bodies, if everybody stays healthy, and now that's a big question mark, because remember the health last year was a major concern for BYU running back. It seemed like every other game, one running back would go down, another one would pop up, and it just was a cavalcade and a charade of just moving guys in and out of the lineup. If you can avoid that this year, have those 4 guys be your core 4 at running back, BYU is going to be really well positioned, I feel like, going in with a star running back and a complement of players to kind of complement everything that he does on the field. And if it plays out that way, BYU's running game could get back to doing what it was in 2020, 2021, 2022, when it was a feared running game. Teams were afraid that BYU had the ball in the fourth quarter with a lead, they would salt that game away. Remember, they carved off, 9 minutes at one point with Tyler Algier in a game to just salt it away completely. That's what BYU wants to get back to doing. And a guy like LJ Martin at 6'2", 225 pounds, he's the battering ram that you want in your backfield when you have that type of scenario play out. And even when it's, you said you need a 3rd and 3, keep the game alive, etc. He is the type of guy that you see hand the ball to and say, go get it for us. He has got all of that in him. And I am looking forward to seeing what he's capable of this fall for the BYU Cougars. All right. coming up in just a moment, we'll round out today's show. 2 notes for you guys before we go on today's show. One on the baseball front, another one on the basketball front. We'll get to those just a moment right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to help you have fun with everything going on in the sports world. Now, no matter what it is, summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, also the Stanley Cup Finals, and you can bet on all of it with our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you get $200, count them, $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can bet on everything from the Finals MVP, who's going to hit one out of the park in any given game you're watching when it comes to the MLB. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and add a big win to your summer bucket list right now. Once again, it's FanDuel.com/locked on to get that $200 with any winning $5 bet. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for being Locked On Cougars, your first listen of the day. I want to remind you guys, if you're not done so already, make sure you guys check out the Locked On Sports Today. It's on YouTube. It's also available on the Amazon Fire TV and the Free Fire TV channels app. It is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league as well. Find Locked On Sports Today available now on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, or check it out on YouTube. All right, so before we go on today's show, a couple of you reached out and said, hey, Jake, what have you heard about Kuhio Aloy? Now, he was BYU's designated hitter, an all Big 12 freshman honoree. There were some rumors that he may have entered the transfer portal, and those rumors are and were true, and he is headed to Arkansas. So for the second time in a week, Arkansas adds a BYU player that BYU probably would like to have had, albeit this time in baseball. Remember, Danny Ainge from the BYU football program opted to transfer to Arkansas after entering the transfer portal right at the end of spring camp. Well, Dave Van Horn and the Arkansas Razorbacks added Kuhio Aloy to their roster. Now, his brother is Wahiwa, plays for the Razorbacks, a pretty natural thing, but Kuhio hit 269, 329, 447 this past year with 53 hits, 8 home runs, and 39 RBIs as a freshman for the BYU baseball program. He looked like a future star for BYU baseball, but as it is, he decided he was going to go search out another opportunity and joins his brother in Arkansas, and that's a hit for the BYU baseball program. This is a program that, frankly, had a very down year, and it feels like it's going to be a really, really tough climb out of the cellar, quote unquote, of the Big 12. I don't think it's going to get any easier if you have guys like a Kuhio Aloy who come in as an all Big 12 freshman honoree, and the second they get the opportunity to leave, they take off. That's a big blow for BYU baseball, and I don't honestly know how they respond to that. They'll have to hit the transfer portal maybe themselves to add some options, or hope that the incoming recruiting class can fix that. But this feels like something that BYU Athletics and Tom Homo as BYU Athletic Director, you get this pretty closely and understand that BYU baseball is in a very precarious position. Do you want them to be the absolute Big 12? Do you have aspirations? It's a cold weather school, so it's always going to be a traditional weakness for them to get top tier talent to play in Provo, but it's been done before, and I hope that BYU can find an option that can figure out. Trent Pratt, in particular, is BYU baseball coach currently. He's got to find an answer for it, because losing an all Big 12 freshman honoree, that's a pretty big hit for your baseball program. On the other side of things, on BYU basketball front, want to say our best wishes go out to the Arnold family. Frank Arnold, the BYU men's basketball coach who led the program to its only Elite Eight appearance in 1981, passed away Saturday at the age of 89. BYU announced that. He was a native of Ogden, Utah, went to high school up in Pocatello, ultimately playing for Idaho State, but then went on to be an assistant for John Wooden for a time before taking over as BYU basketball coach in 1975. From 1975 to 83, put together some pretty incredible teams, obviously headlined by that 1981 squad and the incredible dash to glory that Danny Ainge had to lead BYU to that improbable victory over Notre Dame. It's the thing of legend. And BYU basketball, I'd love to see this BYU basketball team this year surprise us and make a run to the Elite Eight, if not the Final Four. Sure, that'd be great. But the high watermark for the BYU basketball program, if you talk about postseason, it came under Frank Arnold's watch as he led them to that Elite Eight appearance where they ultimately lost to. Now, Arnold had a bit of a crazy He was 12 wins each of his 3 seasons. Then he gets guys like Danny Ainge into the program, have an incredible run in the early 80s. But then by he was essentially forced to resign under pressure. He was, depending on who you talk to, he was fired by then AD Glenn Tuckett. But the talent that he recruited to BYU in the final 3-4 seasons of his run essentially set the framework for BYU's incredibly competitive teams in the 1980s. Think of Michael Smith. Think of just all the big names from the 1980s that you could, Devin Durant. He recruited all of those guys seemingly and set up Liddell Anderson to have, by the way, Liddell Anderson, he was a great coach in and of himself, but to think about the talent that Frank Arnold kind of set him up with, that's a pretty incredible thing. But our best wishes, our thoughts and prayers go out to the Arnold family at this time. Now, his son Gib was the head coach at Hawaii for a short spell. That's ultimately where Frank ended up coaching for 2 seasons after leaving BYU. And it's an incredibly sad time for the Arnold family, I'm sure. But incredible to consider what Frank Arnold accomplished in just, what is it, 8 or 9 seasons for BYU, and 137 and 94 overall. He stayed on BYU until the 83 season. In 85, ended up coaching at Hawaii, and then was an assistant at Arizona State for 2 seasons after his spell with the Rainbow Warriors. But yeah, tough to lose legends like that. And I know that my grandfather, who is 90 years old at this time, I actually made a phone call to him. He said he fondly remembered Coach Arnold from all those years ago. My dad said similar things, that those teams are absolutely incredible. Danny Ainge's tweet about the life and legacy of Frank Arnold talked about the fact that he's kind of ahead of his time. Remember, any of you who know what the Arnold teams did, they were kind of a free-flowing offense, kind of more in the mold of what you see today in the NBA and college basketball, kind of what Kevin Young wants to bring to BYU. Frank Arnold was doing that in the late 70s and early 80s. So incredible life, incredible legacy left at BYU. And like, once again, our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the Arnold family at this time. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. A big thank you to all of you for your support as always. Cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to like, review, rate, all the different things. Click the thumbs up notification on YouTube. Everything you do to support this podcast. If you've not done so, also, you can support us by joining the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to get interaction with the show and also support us as well. But until tomorrow, we'll be back talking all things BYU sports. We'll get another position group preview in for you guys on the BYU football program. We'll just have a lot of fun. It's summertime. It's a really, really fun time. We talk about some different topics, and we'll get to those on the next edition of the Locked On Cougars podcast.